Have you ever found yourself staring at the ceiling at night, heart racing with a vision of a life that feels so much larger than your current reality, only to wake up the next morning and shrink it all back down with familiar excuses? That quiet ache of untapped potential, the way your mind both craves expansion and fiercely resists it, is not random. It is the result of deep psychological patterns that have been shaping your choices for years. Patterns that most people never even notice until something forces them to confront the gap between who they are and who they could become. In this chapter, we will explore the psychology of big thinking and how our thoughts shape our reality. We are now going to discuss why most people think small. Deep within the human psyche lies a powerful preference for the familiar, a survival mechanism that once kept our ancestors safe, but now quietly caps our ambitions. From an early age, we absorb messages from family, school, and society that emphasize security over possibility. Play it safe, they say. Get a stable job. Don't rock the boat. These instructions become wired into our neural pathways, creating an invisible ceiling that feels completely natural. You might recognize this in your own life when a bold idea surfaces only to be met with an immediate internal voice listing all the reasons it could never work. That voice is not wisdom, it is conditioning. Psychologists call it the status quo bias, our brain's tendency to favor existing conditions because change, even positive change, triggers uncertainty and potential loss. Over time, this leads most people to live in a comfortable but cramped mental space where small thoughts feel realistic and big thoughts feel delusional. Consider Rajesh, a 38-year-old accountant living in a bustling Indian city. Rajesh grew up watching his father work the same government job for decades, coming home tired but secure. When Rajesh graduated with honors, he dreamed of launching a small tech service company that could help local businesses go digital. The idea excited him. He even sketched out plans late at night. Yet every time he considered taking the leap, his mind flooded with warnings. What if clients don't come? What if the economy dips? What will relatives say if you fail? Rajesh chose the safe promotion instead, telling himself he could pursue the dream later. Years passed. He became good at his job, respected by colleagues, yet a persistent emptiness followed him. Rajesh's story is common because small thinking protects us from immediate discomfort while slowly stealing our future. You may have done the same, trading long-term fulfillment for short-term certainty, convincing yourself that average is enough. But here is the gentle revelation. The people who build extraordinary lives are not necessarily smarter or luckier. They have simply learned to question that early programming and choose expansion over comfort. We are moving to the hidden mental limits that keep so many of us trapped. These limits are not always obvious. They operate like invisible software running in the background of our minds, filtering every opportunity through lenses of doubt and restriction. Cognitive psychology reveals that our brains construct reality based on past experiences and deeply held beliefs. If you have repeatedly seen people around you settle for modest lives, your mind begins to assume that modesty is the natural order. This creates what researchers term self-imposed constraints, boundaries we accept without ever testing them. You might feel this when you hesitate to ask for a raise or pitch a creative project, sensing an internal wall that says, "People like me don't do things like that." The discomfort you feel in those moments is your psyche bumping against its own artificial ceiling. Priya, a talented marketing professional in her early 30s from Mumbai, lived this reality for years. She had built a successful career managing campaigns for mid-sized brands, yet whenever a larger agency headhunted her for a leadership role, she found reasons to decline. "I don't have enough experience," she would think. "They probably want someone more outgoing." Priya's hidden mental limits came from a childhood where praise was rare and criticism was constant. Her parents, loving but traditional, had emphasized humility above all else. Big achievements were for others, not for girls who should focus on stability. These beliefs became Priya's unseen boundaries. Even when colleagues praised her innovative ideas, she downplayed them, staying in roles that felt safe but left her uninspired. One day, during a quiet moment of reflection, Priya realized how these hidden limits had shaped her path. The awareness itself was the beginning of change. Like Priya, you too carry mental limits formed by experiences you may not even remember clearly. The good news is that once you shine light on them, they start to lose their power. Have you noticed how certain goals feel impossible while others feel manageable? That difference is rarely about external reality. It is almost always about the hidden mental limits you have accepted as truth. We are now going to discuss the fear of failure trap and how it silently sabotages big thinking. Failure is one of the most powerful emotional experiences humans face, and our brains are wired to avoid it at almost any cost. This evolutionary response once protected us from physical dangers, but in modern life it often prevents us from taking the very risks that lead to growth. The fear of failure trap works by amplifying potential negative outcomes while minimizing the cost of inaction. You know this feeling intimately, that knot in your stomach when you consider launching a new venture or sharing an ambitious goal with others. The mind races through worst-case scenarios, creating emotional pain before anything has even happened. This anticipatory suffering is so effective that many people choose the certainty of smallness over the possibility of greatness. The trap becomes especially strong because society celebrates success, but rarely discusses the necessary failures that precede it. Amit, a young engineer from Bangalore with a passion for sustainable energy, fell deeply into this trap. He had developed a prototype for an affordable solar device that could help rural households. Friends and mentors encouraged him to apply for funding and start a company. Yet every time he prepared the application, fear paralyzed him. What if investors laugh at my idea? What if I quit my job and can't pay bills? What if I become known as that guy who failed? Amit delayed for 2 full years, watching others with similar ideas move forward. His fear of failure had created a comfortable prison where he could dream without the risk of disappointment. You might recognize yourself in Amit's hesitation. The fear feels protective, but it actually costs far more than any failure ever could. Psychological studies show that people regret inaction far more than they regret attempts that did not succeed. The trap is real, yet it can be escaped by reframing failure as valuable data rather than personal defeat. When you begin to see each setback as information that sharpens your approach, the emotional power of fear begins to fade. We are moving to how your brain believes repetition and why this shapes the size of your thinking. The human mind is a pattern recognition machine that strengthens whatever thoughts and behaviors we repeat. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself based on consistent input. If you repeatedly think small, worry about limitations, and focus on obstacles, those neural pathways grow stronger while pathways for possibility grow weak. Repetition creates belief, and belief creates perception. This is why the daily mental diet you consume matters so deeply. Every time you scroll through social media, comparing yourself to others or listen to voices that normalize mediocrity, you are casting votes for the size of life you will live. Neha, a schoolteacher in Delhi, experienced this principle firsthand. For years, she repeated thoughts about her financial situation, telling herself and others that teachers could never build real wealth. She repeated stories of limited opportunities, reinforced by colleagues who shared the same narrative. Her brain believed the repetition and filtered out chances for change. When a friend invited her to join an educational content creation project that could generate additional income, Neha almost refused. The opportunity felt foreign to her repeated story. Only after consciously shifting her internal dialogue did Neha begin to see possibilities. She started small, creating short teaching videos in her spare time. As she repeated new thoughts of growth and capability, her brain adapted, making bigger actions feel natural. You have this same power. Notice what thoughts you repeat throughout your day. Are they expanding your world or contracting it? The brain does not distinguish between vividly imagined scenarios and real ones. This is why consistent focus on bigger possibilities literally reshapes your neural architecture, making what once seemed impossible start to feel inevitable. We are now going to discuss the science of self-image and its central role in determining how big you allow yourself to think. Your self-image is the mental picture you hold of who you are, what you deserve, and what is possible for you. This internal portrait, formed through years of experiences, feedback, and interpretations, acts as the ultimate governor of your ambitions. If your self-image says you are the type of person who plays small, no amount of external opportunity will override that belief for long. Psychology has shown through decades of research that people consistently perform in alignment with their self-image, even when better results are available. This explains why some individuals seem to sabotage success, while others naturally rise. The self-image operates like a thermostat, maintaining whatever temperature of achievement you have set for yourself. Vikram, a software developer from Hyderabad, carried a self-image of being technically skilled, but not leadership material. Colleagues saw his potential and nominated him for a team lead position. Despite positive feedback, Vikram felt intense discomfort in the role. His actions, often hesitant and overly accommodating, reflected his outdated self-image rather than his actual capabilities. It took a period of deliberate identity work, including visualizing himself as a confident leader and collecting evidence of his strengths, for Vikram to update his internal picture. As his self-image expanded, his thinking grew bolder and his results followed. You likely have areas where your self-image limits you right now. Perhaps you see yourself as creative but not business-minded, or hardworking but not visionary. These labels feel true because they are familiar, yet they are not fixed. The science is clear. Change your self-image and your capacity for big thinking expands automatically. We are moving to the crucial difference between small thoughts and big thoughts, and how choosing one over the other determines the trajectory of your life. Small thoughts focus on immediate problems, limitations, and reasons why something cannot happen. They feel safe and rational, but lead to incremental progress at best. Big thoughts, by contrast, explore possibilities, connections, and future potential. They require more mental energy and often create temporary discomfort because they challenge the familiar. Yet big thoughts activate different brain regions associated with creativity, motivation, and long-term planning. The gap between these two types of thinking is where most people lose their greatest opportunities. Meera, an aspiring writer from Chennai, spent years trapped in small thoughts about her work. She would write carefully, worrying about criticism and marketability, producing safe stories that never quite satisfied her. One day she decided to experiment with big thoughts. What if her stories could inspire thousands? What if she could blend traditional Indian themes with modern global issues in ways no one had tried? The shift felt scary at first, but as Meera allowed herself to think bigger, her writing gained depth and originality. Publishers noticed. Her small thoughts had kept her hidden. Her big thoughts brought her into the light. You face this choice multiple times each day. When an idea appears, do you shrink it to fit your current reality, or expand your thinking to match the idea's potential? The difference is not in talent or circumstances. It is in the size of thoughts you habitually entertain. Small thoughts protect your ego. Big thoughts expand your life. We are now going to discuss rewiring your mind for bigger goals and the practical ways this transformation becomes possible. Rewiring begins with awareness, moves through consistent practice, and results in new automatic patterns that support expansion. Your brain is not fixed. Every day offers opportunities to strengthen pathways for courage, creativity, and possibility. Start by noticing your current thought patterns without judgment. Then intentionally introduce bigger perspectives through visualization, new environments, and supportive relationships. Replace old stories with empowering ones. Celebrate small evidence of growth. The process requires patience because deep mental habits formed over years do not shift overnight. Yet the rewards compound dramatically. Arjun, a mid-level manager in Kolkata, committed to this rewiring process after years of feeling stuck. He began each morning by writing down 3 big possibilities for his career and life. He sought conversations with people who thought larger than his usual circle. He treated setbacks as data rather than proof of limitation. Over time, Arjun's mind adapted. Goals that once seemed distant began to feel achievable. Opportunities appeared because his heightened awareness and expanded thinking allowed him to recognize them. Like Arjun, you can begin rewiring today by choosing one area where you have been thinking small and consciously experimenting with bigger thoughts. Feel the initial resistance, then keep going. The mind that once limited you will gradually become the greatest ally in creating the life you truly want. We are now going to discuss self-doubt, the silent killer. This invisible force operates quietly in the background of your mind, eroding your confidence before you even take a step towards your goals. Self-doubt is not just occasional hesitation. It is a persistent internal narrative that questions your worth, your abilities, and your right to want more. Psychologically, it stems from early experiences where criticism outweighed encouragement, creating neural pathways that default to skepticism about your own potential. The real-life impact is devastating because it stops you from applying for that dream position, sharing your creative work, or even voicing your opinions in important conversations. Over time, this killer accumulates missed opportunities that compound into a life of quiet regret. You know this feeling well when an exciting idea arises, and immediately your mind supplies a list of personal shortcomings that make it seem impossible. That moment of contraction is self-doubt at work, protecting your ego from potential rejection while slowly suffocating your growth. Amit, a 32-year-old marketing executive in Pune, battled this silent killer for most of his adult life. Growing up in a family that valued stability over ambition, Amit internalized the belief that he was good, but never exceptional. When his company announced a leadership development program that could accelerate his career, colleagues encouraged him to apply. Yet self-doubt flooded in with thoughts like, "You are not ready, others are more qualified, and you might embarrass yourself." He delayed the application until the deadline passed. Months later, when a peer with less experience was selected, Amit felt the sharp sting of what might have been. His self-doubt had not only killed the opportunity, but reinforced the very narrative that kept him stuck. Like Amit, you may recognize how this pattern has played out in your own story. The transformative insight here is that self-doubt loses power when you begin treating it as a habit rather than truth. By noticing it without judgment and gently challenging its claims with evidence from your past successes, you start to loosen its grip and create space for bolder action. We are moving to fear of judgment and how it chains so many people to smaller versions of themselves. This fear arises from our deep human need for social acceptance, a survival trait that once helped tribes stay cohesive but now often prevents authentic self-expression. When you worry about what others will think, you filter your dreams through their imagined opinions, shrinking your choices to fit external expectations. The psychological cost is enormous because it leads to a life lived for applause rather than fulfillment, creating inner emptiness even when you achieve external success. You experience this when you hesitate to post your work online, pursue an unconventional career path, or speak up about your true desires. The fear feels so real because your brain equates social disapproval with danger, triggering the same stress response as physical threats. Sneha, a 28-year-old graphic designer from Jaipur, lived under this fear for years. She had a unique artistic style blending traditional Rajasthani motifs with contemporary digital art, but she kept her portfolio private, showing it only to close friends. The thought of public criticism from family members who expected her to take a corporate job or relatives who might call her work impractical paralyzed her. Sneha turned down exhibition opportunities and freelance projects that could have launched her career. Her fear of judgment created a safe but unfulfilling routine where she worked on others' projects while her own creative voice remained silent. One quiet evening, after seeing an artist she admired receive both praise and criticism online, Sneha realized that judgment was inevitable regardless of her choices. This awareness freed her to begin sharing her work gradually. As she did, the fear diminished and her career started expanding in ways she had only dreamed about. You too can break this chain by remembering that others' judgments say more about them than about you. When you prioritize your own values and vision over imagined approval, you reclaim the freedom to build a life that truly reflects who you are. We are now going to discuss the comfort zone prison and why it feels so safe yet costs so much. The comfort zone is that familiar mental and behavioral space where everything is predictable and low risk, but it functions like a prison with invisible bars. Psychologically, it is reinforced by the brain's preference for energy conservation and certainty, making any move toward growth feel threatening even when the current situation is unsatisfying. Staying comfortable means repeating the same routines, avoiding new challenges, and gradually watching your potential atrophy. You feel the walls of this prison when the idea of changing careers, starting a conversation with someone new, or learning a difficult skill fills you with resistance that seems insurmountable. The longer you remain inside, the smaller your world becomes until mediocrity starts to feel normal. Rahul, a 40-year-old bank employee in Chennai, had built his entire life within this prison. His days followed a reliable pattern of work, family time, and weekend television that provided security but left him increasingly restless. When friends invited him to join a weekend entrepreneurship workshop that aligned with his long-buried interest in sustainable products, Rahul declined, citing his busy schedule. The comfort zone had convinced him that trying something new at his age was foolish and risky. Years of small daily choices had accumulated into a life where his dreams gathered dust. Like Rahul, you may have noticed how comfortable routines can quietly replace vibrant living. Breaking free requires small, deliberate steps outside the familiar, each one proving to your brain that growth brings more reward than fear. As you expand your zone, what once felt dangerous begins to feel exciting, and your capacity for bigger experiences naturally increases. We are moving to why your past does not define you, and how releasing this belief opens entirely new possibilities. Many people carry their history like a heavy anchor, allowing past mistakes, failures, or difficult circumstances to dictate their future identity. From a psychological perspective, this happens because the brain uses past events to predict future outcomes, creating a self-fulfilling cycle where old patterns repeat. Yet your past is simply data, not destiny. It contains lessons and context, but does not possess the power to limit what you can become unless you grant it that authority. You recognize this when you catch yourself saying things like, "I have always been bad at that," or "after what happened, I could never try again." These statements lock you into an old story that no longer serves your growth. Priya, a 35-year-old entrepreneur from Hyderabad, had let her past define her for too long. After a business venture failed during an economic downturn, she spent years telling herself she was not cut out for leadership. The shame of that single failure colored every new opportunity with doubt. Friends who saw her talent tried to encourage her, but Priya would reference her past as proof that she should stay small. Only after working with a mentor who helped her reframe those experiences as valuable training did Priya begin to separate her identity from her history. She launched a new venture focused on her strengths and found success that surprised even her. You have the same capacity to rewrite your narrative. By consciously choosing which parts of your past to carry forward and which to release, you create space for a future shaped by possibility rather than regret. We are now going to discuss the victim mindset trap and how it quietly steals your personal power. This mindset emerges when you focus primarily on what has been done to you rather than what you can do next. While acknowledging real hardships is important, staying in victimhood keeps you emotionally stuck and prevents forward movement. Psychologically, it provides temporary comfort by shifting responsibility outward, yet it also removes your sense of agency and control. You slip into this trap when challenges arise, and your first response is to dwell on unfairness instead of seeking solutions. Over time, this pattern weakens resilience and attracts more circumstances that reinforce helplessness. Karan, a 29-year-old teacher in Lucknow, became caught in this trap after being passed over for promotion several times. He spent months complaining to colleagues about office politics and favoritism, positioning himself as the victim of an unjust system. This mindset not only blocked him from developing new skills or seeking opportunities elsewhere, but also affected his relationships and overall energy. Friends eventually distanced themselves from his constant negativity. Only when Karan began asking himself what he could control and what actions he could take did he start shifting out of victimhood. He improved his qualifications and eventually found a better position at another institution. Like Karan, you may have areas where victim thinking has taken hold. The moment you choose responsibility over blame, even in small ways, you reclaim your power and begin creating different results. We are moving to destroying negative inner voices and the freedom that comes when you stop believing every thought that arises. These voices are often internalized critics formed from past criticism, societal messages, and protective mechanisms that have outlived their usefulness. They speak in absolutes and focus on flaws, creating an internal environment of constant judgment that drains motivation and self-worth. Psychologically, these voices gain strength through repetition, but they lose power when you learn to observe them without attachment. You hear them clearly when attempting something new, and thoughts like, "You are not good enough," or "This will never work," flood your mind. Recognizing them as mere mental noise rather than truth is the first step toward liberation. Anika, a young professional in Bangalore, struggled with particularly loud negative voices that told her she was too quiet to succeed in her field. These voices made networking events feel terrifying and kept her from contributing ideas in meetings. Through daily practice of noticing the voices, questioning their accuracy, and replacing them with balanced perspectives, Anika gradually diminished their influence. She began speaking up more often and discovered that her thoughtful approach was actually valued by others. Her career trajectory changed as the inner environment became more supportive. You can apply the same approach by creating distance between yourself and these voices, treating them as passing clouds rather than defining statements. We are now going to discuss turning pain into power and how your most difficult experiences can become the foundation for your greatest strength. Every challenge carries within it the seeds of transformation when viewed through the lens of growth rather than defeat. Psychologically, this shift involves moving from rumination to reflection, extracting meaning and wisdom from hardship. Pain has a way of sharpening focus, revealing what truly matters and building qualities like resilience, empathy, and determination that serve you in all areas of life. You access this power when you ask what this difficult period is teaching me rather than why is this happening to me. The process requires honesty and courage, but leads to profound personal evolution. Samir, a 42-year-old father from Ahmedabad, faced intense pain after losing his job during a company restructuring. The financial stress and blow to his identity tested him deeply. Instead of becoming bitter, Samir used the time to reflect on his true passions and spent months upskilling in an area he had always loved but never pursued professionally. The pain became fuel for reinvention, and he eventually started a successful consulting practice that gave him more freedom and fulfillment than his previous role. Like Samir, you have likely faced moments that felt crushing at the time, yet contributed to your depth and capability. When you consciously choose to transform pain into power, you break the final invisible chains and step into a version of yourself that is wiser, stronger, and more aligned with your highest potential.